like to think of MOPs maybe as the light or the sound engineers, right? And we have to be
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with that space, right?
Yep.
Where we're not necessarily just like the roadie, right? But we are the technicians that make all of this possible. And we have a certain appreciation for what it is and for what we bring to the table.
Welcome to The Ordinary. I'm your host, Odd Morten Sørensen, and today we're going to talk about what we're actually measuring, why so much of it doesn't matter, and what 2 decades in this industry can teach you about building career on your own terms. My guest today is Maury Demner, a marketing operations and analytics veteran based in Silver Spring, Maryland, with over 20 years of experience across banking, media, consulting, and B2B. He started his career at JP Morgan Chase, spent nearly 6 years at Merkle, one of the top data-driven marketing agencies, and then built analytics functions at Bloomberg Industry Group for almost 8 years. Later, he served as VP of Marketing, Operations, and Analytics at Walker & Dunlop, where his data work helped grow their Walker webcast into the top 1.5% of business podcasts globally, with more than 10 million YouTube views. Today, Maury is Director of Marketing Technology and Operations for Carson Group, a wealth management firm that partners with advisors to grow through technology, marketing, and operational support, a role he recently took on. He also runs his own consultancy, Measure with Purpose, and his tagline might be the most honest thing I've read in this industry. Measure everything leads to clutter, not clarity. He's also co-chapter lead for the DC Metro chapter of the Marketing Ops community. Maury, welcome to the Ordinary Marketing Podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Maury, your tagline is measuring everything leads to clutter, not clarity. That's a provocative thing to say in an industry that's built its credibility on metrics. Where does that come from?
So I think the tagline itself and really measure with purpose where that comes from. I know this sounds kind of silly, but I love to cook. And I love trying to make bread. And I want to say going back maybe like 10 years ago, it's an experience that sits with me where it was New Year's Day, little kids. And had this idea in my head. I'm going to try to make challah, the Jewish bread for the Sabbath. Never did it before. I'm going to
Mhm.
try to make it. And the directions were so specific about use this much yeast and use 4.5 cups of flour and then put a tablespoon of salt in and something like 3 or 4 eggs. I don't remember the whole recipe off the top of my head. But I was so fixated on getting the flour right and getting exactly 4 cups of flour and it even and perfectly in the exact amount that I was short like 2 eggs. And the whole thing turned into like this giant mess. And over time I got much more comfortable with cooking and baking and that sort of thing. And what I realized is you gotta remember the right amount of eggs. But you know what? If it's a half a cup of flour too much, a little bit too short, it's fine. It's all gonna work out. And I think when it comes to
Mm.
measurement, when it comes to marketing, so much of my career I found myself in conversation about um statistical, um, God, why am I blanking on it? T-tests, right? And statistical significance
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we forget about practical significance, right? Like just because statistical
Mhm.
significance really just measures um, if you repeat the experiment, if it's luck or if it's randomness. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about quantities in the millions, a 10 basis points difference makes a difference. That's real money. But when you're
Mhm.
talking about quantities in maybe even the hundreds of thousands or the tens of thousands, which might be typical for a lot of mid-market organizations, it
Mm.
just doesn't matter at that point. It really just doesn't matter at that point. And so the conversations that I like to have with clients, internal partners, colleagues is let's start with what it is that you're trying to do. Let's start with what it is that you're trying to achieve. Every the purpose of marketing is
Mhm,
to influence a behavior or an action, right? Like that is why we do things. That's why we spend the money. That's why we place the ad. And
mhm,
what is most important is starting with what is the action that you're trying to drive. It doesn't matter of if it's measurable or not, but just start with what is it that you're trying to do. And then you can
mhm.
bake the metrics around that. And sometimes you might not be able to measure it directly, and that's okay. But it's important to know what you're aiming for. When I was
Exactly.
sorry.
No, I said
Yeah.
just say exactly.
When I
It's
was
like,
in graduate school, I remember that old cliche. You ever hear that old cliche? Like, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? I don't know
mhm,
if you've heard that before, but I think
yeah,
that sometimes what ends up happening is that we sort of took that to mean if you can measure it, then you should measure it and you should manage it. And that what ends up happening is you end up just feeding the beast, you end up feeding the machine. Like, does it really matter if your click-through rates are amazing, if people aren't buying, or if your form conversion rates are amazing, but it's not ultimately leading to sort of move people further down into but when your salespeople call, no one wants
mhm,
to pick up the phone, right? At the end of the day, what are
yeah,
you trying to do? In B2B marketing, 90% of what we're trying to of our efforts is really to make it easier so that when a salesperson, dials a phone number and the person picks up, that they're familiar and they sort of expect and they know what they wanna hear. You can't really measure that easily, like, you could talk about brand studies and all these things, but at the end of the day, that's the behavior that we're trying to change. And if
yeah,
your optimization is working and doing all kinds of things that it's intended to do, but is not impacting that behavior, then you need to step back and think about what it is that you're trying to achieve.
exactly. I kind of I have the same expression or kind of a different angle. It's like if you measure everything, if you collect all the data, it's just gonna get messy and a lot of noise.
Yeah.
You won't be able to single out anything of value, because it's like, okay, so if you're able to set up a dashboard for this or dashboard for that or report for this or report for that, you should do it. No, because then you end up with 200 reports or 200 dashboards and a lot of more metrics. And actually what people will start asking is, what's the right one to look at?
Somebody when I was at Merkle, one of the things that, one of my colleagues said once, and it's always stuck with me, which is he always starts a project off with a dashboard, and I looked at him funny when he said that, because at that point, I was, like, pretty much very disillusioned with, like, overbuilding dashboards. But then he continued,
Mm,
and he said, "You know what? Here's the thing, when you build a dashboard, you it's the process of building that dashboard where the magic happens, and where you start to have the conversations with the client about what it is that they're trying to do, what it is that they're trying to see, how the different data pieces fit together. And the
mhm,
dashboard itself, I mean, the usefulness of it like lasts what, like a hot minute. But those when you're able to carry it through, when you're able to build and ideally you're building on an analytical infrastructure that you can address ad hoc questions when needed, but you
uh,
have an understanding of how the pieces fit together through building that
mm,
dashboard.
yeah. One other thing I just that came to mind is that it's a difference between where you start. Either like if in Google Analytics you have all these dashboards ready set up for you when you start the
Yeah.
first time
Yes.
and you
Yes.
look at them, and that kind of guides you to what you are going to measure because it's already there. But if you use different analytics tools, like we implemented Mixpanel,
Yes.
and you fire it up and it's like, wow, it's what? It's blank? Where's the reports? Where's the dashboards? Oh, I gotta build them myself. And then you have to actually like actively think, what am I wanting to see on the dashboard? Which report do I want to build? And that is actually a very different maneuver or different setup, and you will get a very different result. And actually, also, you will challenge your organization, because when they ask for, we want some figures or metrics, or we want some stuff to look at the dashboard, and then you ask them, okay, I can build everything. That's the good news. So what do you want to see?
Yeah. Um,
And they're like blank,
yeah, I think
because they don't know they don't know what they want to see. They don't know what, like, and then it's difficult to build the dashboards for them because they don't know what they want to see actually.
but I think it's funny because you reminded me of something when you gave that when you talked about the Google Analytic dashboards and
Yeah.
which is just in general, like the baked in dashboards. And um first of all, I've never really found a use for any of those dashboards that the pre-built reporting that comes out of it. I've
Yeah.
always found myself going down the Explorer rabbit hole. And I think one of the challenges is that if you don't have that analytical mindset, and if you're not
Mhm.
able to probe the business in a right way, it becomes the managing what you can measure mindset, because you end up optimizing not on what the business needs are. You end up optimizing on those things that the only things that you can easily see that are in front of you, which would be not just Google
Mhm.
Analytics, but in general, like any tool that has sort of
Yeah.
those baked in reports. You end up managing it to the tool instead of managing it to your ultimate business needs.
Yep.
I I
It's
think I think what's hard is sometimes you have to have that conversation with the business. I think takes skill and experience to be able to probe in the right way. So I think that
yeah.
it's it's fair questions, because ultimately what you're asking is, what is it that you're trying to achieve? What is it that you want to grow? And then you have to be able to take that back to the data that's available and then position those numbers for them.
Yeah. I noticed that you draw a distinction between things you can measure and things you should manage. How do you decide which is which?
I don't think I ever consciously, like, put down, like, any hard and fast rules. I think it comes down to what is it that you're trying to achieve, knowing ultimately what your end goal is. What is it that what is what is it that you're trying to what is your North Star? And then
Yeah.
what are those things that influence the North Star? And that's basically where you focus your energy into optimizing. I look at something like, um one of the things I look at something like live events and trade shows, right? And one of the things that I remember
Mhm.
this from, I did this at a couple of organizations, but it's so easy. Again, in B2B, you're the marketing team, and the typical way that this sort of thing used to work was that, your company sponsors a booth at a trade show, and then they come back with a bunch of leads, and then you pop those leads into like a funnel, and then you send out a bunch of communications, and then you see what comes with it, right? And
Mhm.
maybe a deal closes 6 or 7 months later, whatever your life cycle stage is, and then the fun begins, because then everybody argues over, did it come from marketing? No, it came from, because we were talking to these people for years, and like, yes, it came from marketing. Yes, it came from the investment at the trade show, right? Like all those conversations
Mhm.
start to happen. And
Mhm.
or there's a trade show, and actually what might be more typical is we spent maybe, let's say, $70,000 all in for the trade show. I'm just throwing numbers out. And um there's nothing that's directly attributed to that event, right? And what I started to do is I started to have conversations with our sales teams, and I said, "Listen, why are you going to the trade show? You guys keep telling me you're going to the trade show because all the people you need to talk to are there, right? Like, let's flip the
Mhm.
script for how we measure this. Like, let's not get into arguments about if being stopping by your booth or attending your event is what drove the some deal that happened 7 months later. Like, let's take advantage of the data we have, which is
Mhm.
who's going to the show, because you can get that information in, right? Let's look at that. Let's bump that up against the databases that we have. Let's enhance it if we need to. Let's create a targeted list. Like, let's not worry about the fact that there's going to be 12,000 people there. Let's identify the, let's say, 100, and then let's set objectives for booking a meeting or reaching out or having contact, because that's why you're
Yeah,
there, and you're there
yeah.
to talk to those 100 people at the end of the day. So again, it's coming down to what is it that you what is it that's important to manage, what you're trying to do, the reason why you're doing this particular making this particular investment of money and time and energy is to have conversations. So what we can measure
Mm.
is, did those conversations take place or not?
Yeah, because that's actually a very good approach. Because usually, it's you can kind of compare that to running a campaign and then afterwards trying to track stuff if it wasn't planned beforehand.
Yeah.
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 Let's that lie, because it's a pain to talk about. But you actually said the same thing about the trade show, because you guys started, you planned it beforehand, and then you did the trade show, and then you had a great plan for it, because usually people get the budget to go to a trade show, go to the trade show and then come back, and then we'll see what happens.
I mean, I think I got
Uh,
tired of, like, it being looked at as a reactive thing. I said we can be proactive
yeah.
about this. Now, there's so much internal politics when it comes to those, though, to what events you attend and how much to invest in those events, and you have to be it's not for the faint of heart, right? Like, you have to be very careful in terms of when to push that kind of agenda. But
Mm.
if you're committed to attending that event, we don't have to wait and see who happens to stop by the booth. We don't have to compete on swag. We can take a very proactive approach so that when we show
Mhm.
up, we know what we're going to get out of it. And again, I think what's also important distinction is that the ultimate goal, right, is to drive revenue. But
Yeah.
there are so many factors that may go into if a deal closed or not, that it's let's start with those things that we can control, which is we know that qualified buyers are going to be at this event. We know who they are. People who we're trying to get in touch with are going to be at this event. So let's make the objective to have those conversations, because we said that we were there
Mhm.
because certain people are going to be there. So let's do everything we can to make that process easier. And then from the marketing side, let's bake our strategy and campaigns or our outreach. Let's assist sales with creating the outreach to make sure that those people that they'll be able to have those conversations.
That's like treating a trade show as an ABM campaign,
I
kind of.
hate the words ABM. I'll be very honest
Yeah,
with you.
well, but
I used to say ABM is like Fight Club. The number one rule of ABM is don't say ABM, because ABM means so many things to so many different people. It means a taco truck. It means technology. It means um, I mean, ABM is really just a selling strategy as opposed to a and then marketing is just assisting it. But oh, if you want to go down the ABM route, I'm happy to go there.
I see a rabbit hole when I know coming up. So we'll funnels and journeys. You said they're frameworks, not strategies.
Yes.
What do people get wrong about them?
I think of a funnel and because first of all, we don't need to have this debate about the funnel is dead and funnels aren't real and the funnel is really just a Gordian knot that's all things twist like an infinity symbol, right? I think funnels are
Yeah.
useful because funnels help us give understanding. I think of funnels kind of like a map where um a map versus a globe, right? Like, we know that the earth is round, and we know
Mm-hmm.
that it's faster if I want to come visit you in Norway, it's probably faster for me to fly over the poles than it is to go straight across the Atlantic. But you won't see that if you're looking at a flat map. but it's not practical to walk around with a globe everywhere. It's not practical to constantly be thinking about the curvature of the earth when you're trying to just see relatively where things are. And so a funnel is useful. A funnel is a useful way of seeing where someone is in the process to think about what to do next with them. But when you start to obsess over the different stages, then it you end up in more about arguments about, um, the framework than the business reality. At the end of the day, we're trying to change a behavior. We're trying to get someone to, either retain their business with us or become a new customer of ours, and then there's different steps along the way, and all the funnel is just a way to wrap our head around it.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's more like um, you can define the various stages of the funnel, but it's not like they're actually in a funnel. They're just at various decisive points in time.
Yeah,
So, and you don't know if they're in the same order as you have mapped up in the
correct.
funnel,
Exactly,
and
exactly,
you don't know how long it actually takes for them to go from the first one to the last one,
exactly.
and they don't. Half of them may not even be at the top of the funnel. They just kind of come in from the side and then convert, and then like looking at funnels in dashboards and reports and stuff like that. I think that's my biggest headache in analytics, because it have you ever seen a funnel that really makes sense?
No, no,
No.
no, no. I mean, but I think that you have to but they can serve a useful purpose,
Yep.
and I think that they can they can help you organize your thinking, and they can help foster conversations.
Of course.
But where what sometimes happens is we use a lot of the metrics that what's really important when it comes to metrics is I think that there are two types of for the most part, there are really two types of reporting. Really three. One is diagnostics, making sure nothing broke. And then the other one is optimization, like is the campaign performing like how did this particular campaign perform? Like, did these campaigns make money, right?
Yeah.
And so that's for you, right? That's internal. That's for you and your manager, one or two levels above or below. And then you have um campaigns to show leadership. Like, am I is like where you have to prove the value of marketing, right? No decisions are made from that except maybe should my boss promote me, but there's no actual business decisions that's coming from that. And I think where things might get lost is when you use the funnel to prove that how'd you end up in academic conversations, right? So I think what's more
Mhm.
important than is this the right funnel or not, but what decisions does the different stages drive? And do they make sense?
Yeah. I think that makes sense. I've seen you describe AI as feeling like the early internet. And sorry for saying this, but you graduated in 1997. So you actually lived through that moment. What's the parallel you're drawing here?
And I'm gonna caution this by saying I feel like every time anyone, including myself, comes out with a parallel, then somehow the world proves us wrong. But from how I see it right now is so I gradu when I started college, right? Um, I had God, I must have had like a DOS machine or something like that with whatever predated Microsoft Word, typed up my papers on it, right? And sometime between 93 and 97, like the internet kinda came out, right?
Yeah.
And the internet, the World Wide Web was, like, in its infancy, right? And if you you could email people, whatever, but you started to see a lot of hobbyists doing a lot of cool things, right? It was just mostly
Mhm,
hobbyists, and those really high tech people. And then a company
mhm,
started using it because it with big budgets. And but what was interesting, and you start to see this similar now with larger companies where it was kind of like on lockdown, right? So I started
mhm,
working, I was like in a management training program in JP Morgan, excuse me, what was then Chase Manhattan Bank when I first graduated college. And it
mhm.
was a big deal to have an email address that you could send to people outside the company. And it was Lotus Notes, by the way. And so everything was clunky. It was just kind of there. The websites were managed by the IT department. And
Yeah,
most of the people doing things on the internet were very technical, sophisticated people that just really that was their jam. And when you see something like AOL come along, right? Where
yeah,
it was a curated view of the internet, right? But they made it easy. You didn't have to mess with like all those different I'm totally blanking on what like the TTPS and all those different coded numbers to connect to anything. It was just there. It
yeah,
was for you. But
yeah,
the companies were still like everything was still restricted and on lockdown. And when you think about AI right now, right? Like like I've been in a situation like where you see a lot of companies where they are sort of encouraging people to use it, but then they're saying don't use it. You got to fill out a form. Like there's all sorts of and um you but at the same time everybody's at home kind of playing with their chat GPT, right? But
yeah,
or their Claude or Gemini or whatever they're using right now. Um,
yeah,
and you're also seeing people play around with things with agents and N8 and even, like, I feel like there's a home use for, like, Zapier and things like that, but it's very technical people that are doing that, right? It's
mhm,
not your average person that has a ChatGPT subscription, to sort of, answer questions, using it well, using it for prompts, but talking about agentic use it's not there yet because we don't really have an easy guided framework to be able to do it. And
mhm,
when I think about again like the early internet and like how that was, it was there, it was clunky, but somehow certain things happened which enabled it to become what it is today. And we don't really know exactly what that's going to be, but I think
mhm,
where you had a guest, like maybe last week, and I was listening to them, and like I really liked it was "Humans Are the Bottleneck" was the episode I was listening to, and one of the things that I would double down on that he said was talking about like the middle market. And I think the middle market businesses are really where you're gonna see a lot of the most movement and who are gonna have the biggest benefit. Because again, just like if you think about, um, the early internet and websites, like websites literally look like a store, right? Like when we talked about storefronts,
mhm,
like those early 2000 websites, like it was shaped like a store. And so
yeah,
we're using AI, we're thinking of AI like within the framework that we know, which is sort of human behavior, human interaction. And when when we're going to start to see these middle market companies that don't have legacy processes, that don't have any baggage, and where I think it's going to get interesting is that we don't have to communicate with chat with a excuse me with AI in a human manner because it's not human, but that's sort of the communication that we're comfortable with and that we know. And I sort of see the same thing with as the internet became not a digital version of our life, but something else. I see the potential for how we leverage AI being something else, and I see it being driven by those companies that have budgets and stability, but don't have the baggage that you're gonna see with the large legacy organizations.
Yeah, exactly. I think agile is a key word. The mid market companies are more agile than the huge corporations.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. And AI is a s and what AI does is it allows them to compete on a level that they that, it evens the playing field with the big boys, because the big boys
Yeah.
have a lot of there are a few large organizations out there that have that have the flexibility to be nimble and large at the same time. But I
Mm.
think it's different but many of them, they have too much baggage to be able to really jump on it in the same way.
Mm.
We're not even
Yeah.
talking about, I mean, we could talk about data processes, we talk about like the cleanliness of the data, technical debt, etc. But those mid-market companies, they're playing to win versus playing
Yeah.
not to lose.
Exactly. To bring this kind of back to MOPS.
Yeah.
For MOPS people watching, um, where should they, in your opinion, where should they focus their AI energy, so to say, right now? Not the hype, but the practical reality.
I mean, I would like to think that anybody in MOPS today, at least at a minimum, has their own LLM accounts and is starting to at least get comfortable and getting familiar with it. Like I would
Mm.
start there. Um, I would say that understand the tools that you have and what features are leveraging AI and what are not. But again, AI is really just a tool and a feature, right? What it allows you to do is it allows you to I'm just thinking about some of the use cases in terms of just organizing your own information and your own data, because you can't look at everything all at once, right? And so
Mhm.
when I think about MOPS, one of the most exciting use cases I think with AI, and I know this feels very basic because it's not agentic, it's not automated workflows, but even as simple as journey mapping, right? Like
Yeah.
what was always the bottleneck when it came to journey mapping was not the ability to segment the audience. It was the ability to take the content and classify the content and figure out what part of the journey each piece of content is associated with, right? And seeing where the gaps were.
Yeah.
Because those conversations go beyond technology and they go into more of the creative and the messaging, and something gets lost somewhere. Um, and but by taking the content, and these models, right, they do a really good job of summarizing existing information, summarizing content, categorizing things, and being able to imagine you could take everything, all your different assets that you have available, right? If you're talking about nurture programs, right? And white papers that are on
Mm.
the website, and define sort of what are the different stages of I'm going to go back to that funnel word just for a minute, but like what are those different stages or wherever this fits within your journey, and say, "Hey, can you classify where these pieces of content fit?" You know, and what you may find is, "Oh wow, everything is all set. This is great. Like, let's just map these things out." Or it's like, "Wow, we have a lot of stuff for the top of the funnel, but when someone's really interested in talking to like salespeople or they want to learn a little bit more, we have a big gap there. Let's create that content." And so I know it's a little. I think that I'm a little lost, to be honest with you, about when you start talking about agentic and connecting like Marketo to your Claude and all these things, like that's an area that I want to understand a little bit more.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of other things I think that need to, before you start talking about that, there's probably room to start to clean up some of the basics.
Yeah. You know, uh, to be honest, why I think that MOPS really need to get familiar with any LLM. Try them all, or at least ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity. Um, is that okay? So all SaaS software almost is building AI functionality within the software itself, right? Um, I, from my heart, I think that we, in a not so distant future, all the in-app AI will be just tossed out because you will have ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity on the outside, connected through APIs, and they will be so much better at talking to and connecting to and reading and working with your software than any in-app AI ever will because the
No, no,
it's
that
so
makes
much
perfect
better.
sense. It reminds me of it reminds me of, like, when I was, like, when I was working with when I was at Bloomberg and we had Eloqua, and one of the things that surprised me the most was that there's the reporting itself was pretty weak. And I
Mm,
remember thinking, I wish that they just had a better toolkit to just integrate with to just a better API to just integrate the data and read it into our own environment, and then we can analyze it and
mhm,
work with it and do what we need instead of being able to muddle through it. So what you're talking about makes perfect sense, right? Like, clean up just let let the LLMs companies which know how to build an LLM and know how to work through that, create the handholds so that they can work more efficiently with those tools. I like that. That makes a lot of
yeah.
sense.
Yeah, and exactly, and at when you further down the line, you don't even have to log into ChatGPT or Claude because you can connect it to something like Slack or Teams. Then you can chat to the LLM in a certain Slack channel or Teams channel, and then you will, get me the data from there or set up this, fix this. Then you have like you swap you have the chat interface is in your Teams or Slack or whatever you use, and yeah, so the LLM is just a connection between your Teams and all the software. And why should you have any in-app AI functionality then?
I think when
Just a
but
thought.
but I think that you're talking when you say in-app functionality, you're talking about a chat functionality. I think where I see the AI functionality, like the in-app, is more of like the back end thing. So at a basic level, things like send time optimization, which is probably more of like I wouldn't call that like an AI sophisticated AI, but in other words, like things that are happening automagically. The boss who used to call
Yeah.
it automagically, um, that you don't even that you don't even necessarily notice, and it's able to make certain adjustments for you so that that you don't need to. Even if you think like if you think about like editing software, right? Or
Yeah.
where it you're not manually doing those things. That's AI doing it. It's just not a chat type of functionality.
No, but okay. So, to be perfectly clear,
Yeah.
I was thinking about all the in-app chat interfaces
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
many have
Yeah. Yeah.
developed. That is, I don't see how you can continue doing that. Just make sure you have an MCP or an API for any LLM to connect with, and you know, yeah, that's the
I
way
mean, a
going
lot of that
forward.
stuff is
I
here
think,
now too. Like I haven't had a chance to play with it,
yeah,
but that's my understanding, right? Like where you can
yeah,
basically go to Claude and say, "Hey, go build my campaign workflow," and it's basically building it out for you.
Yeah, yeah. You have Claude in PowerPoint, Excel, hook it up to Notion, Google Drive, uh, Canva, Miro. You know, it's crazy. But that's we're falling down into an AI rabbit hole now.
Yes.
I want to talk about something else.
Yes, please.
You had a career path that a lot of MOps people would find interesting. We touched into it in the start. J.P. Morgan, Chase, Merkel, nearly 8 years at Bloomberg, VP at Walker and Dunlop, and now your own consultancy. What's the through line here? What's connected all of it?
Always think of myself as an enabler.
Mhm.
Making things, creating processes, creating workflows to make it easier for people to do their job. That's that's what I love to do. Love to sit down with the business user, with the strategist, with other parts of the team, with the client, and basically just what is it that you're trying to achieve? What is it? How do you work? Right. So like on
Mhm.
the consulting side, one of my clients is a commercial real estate broker, and he is growing from learning how to transition from scrap paper and spreadsheets into more of a CRM based model. And
Mhm.
a lot of the conversations that we have and my business partner have with him is, how do you work? Like, how do you want to work? Like, how do you think about these things? And sometimes he'll literally send us a picture of like the papers on his desk. And it's like, okay, that's how he's processing. That's how he's doing with the paper. How do we make it so, like, how do we, um, structure. We know that moving into a cloud-based system in the long run will be better for him and enable him to work so much better and faster, right? Like,
Mhm.
there's reasons why we're having those conversations, and but how do we make sure that the systems that we're setting up support how he wants to work, how he thinks of his business? And I love those conversations. I love basically what I love about data, like being in the center of the marketing data is give me full access to the database, give me the tools I need, and within like, mm, let's say within like 2 or 3 days, I'll be able to have an intelligent conversation with any leader that's been around, any of the business stakeholders that have been around for, that have been there for years. Because you can start to see the patterns. You could see what's actually happening, not what people wish was happening or they think is happening or one person says over here, which is different from over there, but you're actually looking at what is moving through the system.
It's kind of having what is it called? Like a meta perspective.
I totally believe in a mythology. Everything you're doing, when you're doing anything, you have to have a mythology because part of the challenge is we have access to all the data, right? So that means that you can
Mhm.
fall down those rabbit holes. And so what I always do whenever I'm involved in a new project is I literally sit down on a piece of paper, right? And I do 2 things on that piece of paper before I really move forward. One is I make up a list of all the questions that I write at the top, like, what is the core question? And then I write, like, what are the 10 questions, the 10 things that we need to find out to be able to answer this? What are the 10 things that we need to pull out of the data? Or maybe it's 5, or maybe it's 20, whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
And then I map out how the data fits together and how I'm gonna get that answered. And then I'll talk to the resource or I'll open up SQL or whatever it is. I'll start the process of actually getting those answers. And the reason why this is super important is because when you go down those rabbit holes, when you start to look at the data, there's like a million different side panels that you can get. Like you see something that's weird, that's a little bit different. And so having that's like my rope, right? That's my safety harness
Mhm.
because if I start to drift too far down the rabbit hole, then I'll sort of tug on it a little bit and I'll say, okay, is this piece of information that I'm trying to figure out tied to one of those 20 questions? Yes. Okay, fine. Keep digging. No, it's not. Okay, well, is this a question we should have come up with? Like, is this something we need to add or think about? Yes. Okay, then we dig. More often than not, it's no, and then we write it down and we come back to it later. And I think that again, having a method to how you approach these questions is so key, especially by the way with AI and LLMs because it's so easy. You start to type something in, and then you go down like 3 hours later, you go down this rabbit hole about who knows what.
Yeah, you have to reel the AI in.
And well, reeling the AI in is not the problem. It's reeling ourselves in. Look,
Yeah,
we go, if you're in MOPS and if you're dealing with data to be successful, you have to have a natural inclination for curiosity. I still remember once in grad school, the professor, like, for a joke, he locked me out of the classroom because I asked too many questions. Like, I am a naturally curious person, but I think what you have to learn is how to tame that curiosity because otherwise you won't be able to actually deliver.
hmm, that's a good one. I like it. Maury, you worked in large enterprise environments and mid market
Yes.
at once.
Yes.
You've said you'd choose mid markets every time.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
that's a
Yes.
very strong take. Why?
Because I think that there's something tempting to take a for a role. There's something that's very attractive for a role within a large organization, right? You get the name recognition, you're hearing
Yeah,
big budgets, you're hearing stability. And first of all, I think that stability, anyone who reads the news knows that that's just not the case anymore, right? Like how
yeah.
the impact, like what your fate is not necessarily within your own hands and within the hands of your performance. And change and impact becomes an issue of layers, right? It's just very hard to get things done and to have an impact within those larger organizations. And those budgets
Hmm.
sometimes go through so many different processes that they're just not there. Now, with a mid-market organization, you there's usually a period of you have the opportunities to drive change. There's usually a reason why that role exists in the first place. The s- making in terms of stability, there's because there's fewer layers, change can be much more deliberate in those sorts of organizations. And it's just more fun. Someone said to me when I was at Merkel, when I was first starting out at Merkel, someone said to me, Maury, when you're at work, you're either working on your own vision or you're working on someone else's. And it's a lot more fun to work on your own vision. And so with those mid-market organizations, you're able to just do more, drive change, be nimble. Now, there sometimes can be more, I don't know. I was about to say sometimes there could be a little bit more chaos and um, friction, but I think that
Hmm.
I think that I don't know if I would actually say that as I start to think through it. I think that even large organizations have a certain maybe I think it's a different type of chaos because I think you're seeing a lot of change that can happen all at the same time. You have to sort of be comfortable figuring out how to carve out your own lane or how to and when to delve into other areas versus in large organizations where maybe there's more stability there, but then there just is also just as much internal politics, but it's a different type.
What you said there, either working on your own stuff or building someone else's stuff. What do you think that means? That could mean for people in mobs where the work is often invisible or reactive by nature.
So I'm thinking of two different analogies that I've heard before.
Uh-huh.
One is that the worst thing that someone said once was like I had a CMO and someone described the situation as, well, the way that this person likes to think is that marketing is like a cruise ship and you have the floor shows and the buffet and the pool, and that's kind of like where her attention is because MOPS is more like the boiler room. Now,
Yeah.
that always bothered me a little bit because, first of all, if you build when you make the engine better, you can go to ports that you couldn't ordinarily go to. Or maybe we're not a cruise ship, maybe we're a battleship, in which case engineering operations is key. But the
Mhm.
other analogy that I might take would be, look, if you think of it kind of like a show, right? Like a stage show, right? And when I was in
Mhm.
college, I had the chance to spend a couple of years at a like a 2,400 seat theater, and I worked. They employed students as stagehands. It's really cool. It's not very good at it, but it's a really cool experience. But
Yeah.
I like to think of bops maybe as the light or the sound engineers, right? And we have to be
Mhm.
comfortable with that space, right?
Yep.
Where we're not necessarily just like the roadie, right? But we are the technicians that make all of this possible. And we have a certain appreciation for what it is and for what we bring to the table. What is important about MOPS, and I think that we're trying to figure all of this out, is that conversation when we were talking about frameworks and funnel earlier, where at the end of the day, it's not about our frameworks and our funnel and our journey mappings and everything else. What our role is, especially in B2B, and I think it's a little different in B2C, but especially in B2B, is that our role is to make it easier so that when a salesperson calls someone, that that person is more likely to pick up the phone or engage in a conversation because of the fact that there were campaigns and programs that where they know who they are, right? And
Mhm.
so where MOPS can get lost is feeling like our journeys and our funnel is the whole strategy and is the whole program, where I don't think that that's really true anymore. I mean, if you think about um I was thinking a lot about email the other day,
Yeah.
and I forget if I told this to you or not, but at least to the people watching, I haven't. But like, I'm going through this odyssey, this exercise right now where I'm trying to clean up my 20-year-old Gmail box. Right. I'm like
Mhm.
tired of like every once in a while deleting a few emails. So I'm literally trying to break it down. And so I connected it to an email client on my laptop, and I'm going through it, deleting like maybe like on average, let's say 4,000 messages a day from the past that I never opened that was somebody trying to sell me something. So one side note,
Mhm.
it feels like nothing changed in 20 years because a lot of the marketing related emails feel like the same problems we're talking about now, we talked about in 2009. But
Yeah.
the other thing is that I get on average 150 emails a day. Right?
Mm.
150 emails are going to my Gmail box a day. That's not a direct channel anymore at that point. And so in terms of
No.
MOPS, it's like when you're talking about building or what is the role in all this, it's basically figure out our focus is on enabling the marketing to run smoothly and for it to be measured.
I would like to just highlight your analogies
Okay.
for mops
Yeah.
because I really like both of them.
Okay.
The first, the boiler room, and also the like being the sound technicians or light
Yeah.
technicians for the show. Because one thing both of those analogies have in common is the invisibility,
Yeah.
and that you only hear anything about your job when you fuck it up,
Yeah.
when it goes wrong,
Exactly.
when it goes sideways, right? When it doesn't work, then you get to hear about it. But if it works perfectly, everybody's just yeah. So it's like
I don't think anybody can recall unless you're in that business. I don't think anybody knows who won the sound engineer award for the Oscar for the last sound engineer award, right? Like, no one knows, but if you go, but a movie could bomb if sound is terrible, right? Like,
yeah,
so yeah, I mean, it definitely can be a
yeah,
lonely place. It can definitely be a lonely place to be.
yeah. I took 1 year in school trying to become a sound technician,
Huh.
actually sound
I could see
engineer.
that.
So that was actually what we something we learned very quickly there, that the having the perfect sound in a movie or anywhere, that's just expected. Because if you get the like if the in the movie it's raining and you don't hear any rain, it feels fake. Or if you hear rain and it's not raining, it's it's displaced. It's, oh, this sucks, this is a terrible movie, blah blah blah. But if you nail everything, it's like silence. Nobody's like, oh, great movie, yeah, great actors,
And
because then you have kind of laid the territory for everything else to excel.
but I wanna be very clear, this is not MOPS is not an order taker type of role, and I
Ru-
I don't want to imply that by sort of by saying it enables other things to happen. I don't mean that in any way. Um, I think what's cool about being in MOPS is that you're not necessarily in the fray. Right? Like, if you think
mm,
about your marketing strategists or marketing managers or whatever, they're this sort of very similar role, which could have different names. They're under so much pressure and stress from their manager, the CMO, the sales
mhm,
team, the product marketers, maybe some support service team, the creative team. They are very much like, and they're trying to sort through and they're trying to figure it out and they're trying to find a strategy and an approach that both will drive the business forward and is palatable to the internal teams.
mhm.
And where mops can play a very powerful role, and it's one of these roles which is like the glue, right? Where it's like the X factor, nobody sees it, right? I think the difference
Mhm.
between someone having a huge impact in a marketing operations leadership role and someone who's just kind of there is the person who has the impact is able to sort of be that silent voice of wisdom, right? And be able, or not
Yeah.
silent, but excuse me, the invisible voice of wisdom that's able to kind of go, hey, I'm looking across the board and I'm seeing this is working and this is working. Why don't you try this strategy? Or
Mhm.
what is the objective of your putting those help giving them the little push to sort of sit to sort of go back to the business and say, what is the objective of the campaign? What is it that you're trying to achieve? And that's not
Yep.
within the mob's job description. You're not managing that's not managing the technology. That's not setting up campaigns. But it's being able to get the most out of that technology because you're tying it and you're sort of saying, what is the clear objective of the efforts that associated with what we're doing here?
Maury, before we wrap up, if someone listening or watching takes one thing away and actually does something different tomorrow, what would you want that to be?
I would say the most important question is to ask the teams that you're supporting and enabling is what is it we're trying to achieve? Like, what is the action that you're trying to drive? What is the behavior that you're trying to influence? And and you may have to ask that question in different ways or really be thoughtful with how you ask it because no one ever asked them that question before. And
Uh-huh.
they may not have that answer ready, or you may not get the clarity that you want. And you have to be okay with that. But even just asking that conversation will give you so much more insight, give you so much insight into how to do your job to support the business than you could have imagined.
I would like to add to that because many of the people in the audience, they are maybe a MOP team of one, and actually the whole marketing team
Yeah.
as one.
Yeah.
And to those, ask actually those questions that Maury just said. Ask them to yourself and kind of try and see the solutions or the answers yourself, because that's you need to kind of shift the perspective a little bit and try to find maybe better answers or new answers than you have had before.
I mean, I think that that's the question that we all that especially when we're a team of one, that's the question that we wrestle with. That's the question that the marketing is
Yeah.
wrestling with, and it's okay if you don't have the answer. I think that's important too. I think just asking
Yeah.
the question is a very important step forward.
Yeah. That will get you there.
Yeah.
Maury, where can people find you? LinkedIn, your consultancy, anywhere else?
So, consultancy is the website is measurewithpurpose.com.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find some white papers for some of the work that we have done, as well as again a recap on my experience, my business partner's experience, and just our thought process in general with how we approach it.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely open to connecting with people on LinkedIn. Um, Very easy to find me on there. And if you're most importantly, if you're in the DC area, please, MOPS is an amazing organization, and the DC chapter, we're really trying to help grow it out. Lots of different types of organizations in there, from advocacy to consulting firms. Again, provide service providers as well. Please reach out. We would love to have you connect with us.
Great. Maury Demner, thanks for being on the Ordinary Marketing Ops podcast with me.
Thank you. Thank you for having
And
me.
hope to speak soon again.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.